Everyone, and thank you for your patience, but we are all now here. I'll call the meeting to order. This is a continuation of the meeting that we had started last Friday or Thursday. No, Friday, I'm sorry. And the New Shoreham Town Council is meeting via telecommunications pursuant to the State of Rhode Island Executive Order 25, dated April 15th, 2020. The participants of the meeting will be able to speak during the meeting if necessary. Will include all the town council, obviously, including Second Warden Andre Boudreau, Councilman Christopher Willey, Martha Ball, and Sven Riesum. Also, interim town manager Jim Kern is on with us, as well as town solicitor Catherine Marola. We also have EMA directors Bill McComb, Peter Gemp, and Police Chief Ben Carlone. Building official Mark Tilson is also on. And the town clerks are also monitoring the meeting. I will remind everyone that if you do want to send in a comment, Dr. Tom Warkup is with us this afternoon from the medical center. If you do want to send in a comment, you can do so to new-shoreham.com. And I'm sorry, send your comments to townclerk@new-shoreham.com. That's townclerk@new-shoreham.com. All right. So this is a continuation of the previous meeting. We've gone through the first couple items on the agenda, and we got into the final item on the previous agenda, which was the next steps of COVID-19 health, safety, welfare, and management by the town of New Shoreham. And at that point, we adjourned. And so we're going to meet again to take up some additional business and discussions, as I said, about health, safety, and welfare and management. So I think the first thing with Dr. Warkup on, we were just about ready to talk about was medical issues. I don't know if anyone has any questions specifically from the council for Dr. Warkup. Does anyone have any questions or comments to begin? Chris Willey?
Are we going to review his testing proposal, I guess, from Friday? I believe he was in the car, so we couldn't really get into it. But
yeah, we could ask him to do that. Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Tom, are you there?
I am.
Great. Would you mind doing that for us?
Sure. So the health center, we're gotten back to core business. We're starting to see our regular continuity patients again, which is terrific. We drew up a COVID testing algorithm that is somewhat of a phased approach. We have a COVID positive response plan and an ability of how we would manage those individuals that are symptomatic and those that are also asymptomatic. We have, due to a lot of great work here from people at the health center, we just secured the Abbott rapid testing machine from the Department of Health, where we will have free of charge from FEMA cartridges that will have an ability to produce a result within 13 to 15 minutes. We should have roughly 100 by the end of next week, as well as we're securing over 100 nasal swabs for capacity at different levels, depending on how you feel like the health center could help in the COVID response. We have an algorithm that I can send on for review that has how we would manage symptomatic patients as well as asymptomatic patients and disposition them either off the island or care in place if appropriate.
So Tom, that was a really quick update. Thank you. But so you had said, and that's good news. I mean, the rapid testing machine is on the island, or you're going to be getting it?
I'll be here Friday.
Okay, this week. Okay, great. And so those you get 100 tests that will be able to run through that machine next week?
That's correct. That's our anticipation. The machine will be picked up at the DOH this week with an initial set of cartridges, and then we get the remaining cartridges through FEMA, and we have the ordering process currently in place, as well as securing the more conventional nasal swabs through the DOH plus the ones that we have on hand. So we'll have a system A and a backup system.
So the protocols for using for accessing that machine and for doing testing on a particular patient will be what?
They'll make an appointment. How they get access to it, they'll make an appointment through the health center. We'll bring them in for counseling to make sure they understand what the kind of consequences of the test is or are, meaning it is a point in time data piece, and make sure that we're aligning both what their goals of care are and what the test is going to tell us, whether or not antibody testing may be more appropriate. For asymptomatic patients currently that have a lot of concerns and would like to allay their fears, we're going to use swab technology for that. And then if we develop any concerns for a symptomatic patient that may be COVID positive, we'll do the rapid test. The benefit of that is we'd get an answer immediately for tracing purposes, and we can then notify the DOH and coordinate with them about contact tracing for the remaining of the people that they have been in contact with.
Now, the second testing procedure takes how long to get the results back? Not the quick one.
Roughly, we're getting it back in 3 to 4 days, the swabs.
All right. Questions? Chris Willie, go ahead.
I think you answered this as far as prioritizing, as far as symptomatic patients would be obviously prioritized for the quick test. Last week, I think you touched on potential testing available for seasonal workers coming in. And are we still considering that or moving forward with our employers in that process, or where are we with that?
From my standpoint, we're going to continue to accumulate tests in both formats. I think once we know that the FEMA supply chain is very adequate and timely, we'll probably then pivot to the rapid testing as a principal source. But I am preparing, and we are preparing here with our own protocols of assisting however the town council would like to. I think the first priority would be, or the first recommendation is, if they can get a COVID test on mainland before they come, that would be great. But if there's an application where you think COVID testing would be something that the business owners may need for community safety, we're at the ready to help.
Thank you.
Ken?
Yep, go ahead, Sven.
Dr. Warcup and maybe Chief Carlone, first of all, Dr. Warcup, welcome to Block Island, and thanks for bringing the beautiful blue skies. Could warm up a little bit, so we appreciate that as a next step. But I know, and I don't know if you've talked to the chief at all, that he has been looking into opportunities to potentially test folks, especially seasonal employees on the mainland side. Have you been able to touch base with him? And or if not, we can wait till the next meeting.
I've not had a personal conversation on that point, but I think that's an extremely helpful process as a plan A, and the health
Chief,
center will have a plan B.
Chief, are you on the phone and want to make any comment, or is it too early?
Well, there's several possibilities that we're looking into. There's a mobile testing center run by MedTech Ambulance Service that's up and running. And there's a couple of other things. I talked to a person at the health department, so I need to get a little more information before I could talk about it with you intelligently.
Thank you. And I know a lot of the hotel, or at least they say the employers, are interested in covering any costs that have been identified, but we'll see what that looks like as it boils down. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Warcup.
Dr. Workup, what is your understanding in terms of what this testing like this would mean in terms of quarantining? This doesn't usurp the necessity for quarantining if someone's coming out of state, does it?
No.
Okay, so they would still have to quarantine. It merely gives them a clean bill of health at the time of testing.
Right, or the ability for us to rapidly pivot to contact tracing.
Okay, I understand. Andre, go ahead. Andre, are you muted?
Andre, not Martha. Unmuted. So have we as a council, we've talked about this, and I think this is going to be a council decision. So before we move any further, I'm just wondering, do we as a council feel as though we want to have the businesses test the off-island workers, and I say, where they're coming from out of state that would be required for quarantine. So are we as a council unanimous on that, or is this a policy? Because we never discussed if we're going to require this, but we're talking about it. So I'm kind of wondering what the thoughts are on the council. Personally, I feel to bring some sense of security to the residents, I think it's a good idea to have the workers come and be tested. But I'm just wondering if I don't believe we've had the discussion on the council level as if we want to require this. But so if anybody could fill me in on that.
Sven?
My suggestion would be, I talked to the chief the other day about it and he just gave the update. I think until we have sort of a proposal, it's too tough. And, understanding what the costs are, implications to the businesses, et cetera. So I think once a proposal can be made, is that when we should weigh in, Andre?
Well, I don't know. I mean, how do we feel about that? I mean, do we think that that's a good idea before going down that road and requiring this? Like I said, testing off island's great, but I mean, as a community, I think a lot of the residents will feel a lot more secure if people coming from the hotspot states were tested before they came here. And I do feel that way myself. And if we do it off island, I mean, how can we prove that? Because anybody could say, oh yeah, I was tested. Like, I think, so basically I would just explain where I'm coming from. I think as a body, as a town council, I think we can only do what the best we can do for the protection of our residents. And, I think the only thing we can do is require that testing and then test negative. They come out, they test negative, you put them in the 2-week quarantine. And then after that, they're going to go to work. They're going to have contact with, people in a tourist town. And I don't think there's anything we can do after that, but I think it would be incumbent of us to do the best we can for the security of the residents. And, that's where I'm coming from. That's my thoughts. Like testing with a proof of a test.
Chris Willie?
That my decision would hinge on the absolute ability to do it and without any interruption in a supply chain of any sort. So that as long as that ability is there, then I think it should certainly be done. Why not? So as soon as I see a proposal of some sort that says that this can be done and this is how it can be done and this can be done all summer long or till there's an end point, then let's proceed. But from what I understand, we don't have that yet. So I think it would be a good idea, and I think it would put a lot of people's minds at ease, or somewhat at ease, including the employers and including residents. So if we can move forward with some type of proposal, something concrete to actually make a decision on, I would like to do that.
Martha?
Are you Ken?
Yeah, go ahead, Martha.
Are you talking about on island or off island? 'Cause I agree with Andre. The more that we can get done on the mainland and have confirmed, I think the better position everyone is in, including the people who are being tested.
Yeah, Sven, go ahead.
The chief's been working on this. I think everybody's sort of saying the same thing. Let's see what the proposal is. We obviously I think we would all love to have everybody tested. The issue is we've also got a number of seasonal workers that are now here that have come in the last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So, should we be testing them? So let's see what the costs are, what the opportunities are from the chief and from the doctor, and maybe they can come up with a proposal. And I would ask them to come up with a proposal so that we have something to react to that we can act on.
Andre, do you want to weigh in again? Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. Sven, I agree 100%, but you just hit the nail on the head. Workers are coming. So how many are going to get here before we decide on a policy of testing? So I get it. Does a motion need to be made? We all agree people should be tested before they come here or while they're here. Then they go into their 2-week quarantine and then they go to work. Soon. We need to, how soon could we get the answer to this, because like I said, I think on a daily, maybe not on a daily basis, but workers are coming. So how many are going to slide in from hotspots before we get this up and running? And if it takes too long, is it even worth it? So, and then it's a moot point. Like I said, I guess I just am requiring, I'm asking for immediate action. And I don't know if that's possible. So if anybody could help me out there.
Well, I could, at the very least, that the council doesn't have enough information to make it hard and fast policy at this time. We can certainly make it a strong recommendation that it happen as much as possible and as soon as possible, and happen on the mainland whenever possible. And if we get more information that we can nail down to a hard and fast rule, then we can act at that time. But for right now, we can certainly say that the council recommends that any incoming workers be tested before they come to the island, and have that documentation of their negative test with them when they come to the island. Sven, go ahead.
Chief, do you think you can work with the doctor and come up with at least details and a plan by Friday? I mean, what time-wise, where are you in being able to offer a plan?
Well, first of all, you could never pass a law that orders somebody to take a test. So this is voluntary. This is on a voluntary basis, but of course, I think you would get very high percentage of cooperation from people if we could facilitate this. The state itself, the health department, cannot do this. They recommend taking the temperature of the people coming and just monitoring them during the quarantine, individually at businesses. Some businesses have already taken the steps to put a procedure together where they will accept the workers in. And by the way, there's some coming in within 2 days, where they will take the workers in, quarantine them, cook for them, feed for them on island, maintain taking temperatures and so on and so forth, and looking for symptoms. The state also recommended to just ask the basic questions. Have you experienced any symptoms? There's several different sets of symptoms, as you know. So that is really all the state can do for us at this point, unless somebody is, in fact, symptomatic. There are other private testing agencies that are underway working on ways to create a mobile testing site. That is not something we're going to do in 2 days, unfortunately. And that's what I have on this thus far.
Okay.
So I think the businesses would be a great deal of help to get a plan for them to quarantine these workers and have a procedure for that that's pretty consistent throughout, especially the larger businesses, and monitor their health from there to start with, because it's coming within 2 days.
It's already here.
Sven, did you have a comment? Sven?
Ken?
Yeah, go ahead, Jim. Jim Kern.
I think a lot of workers are already here.
I'm sorry, who's that? Jim, did you?
That was Sven, and he said, I think a lot of workers are already here.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead,
I
Jim.
think it's also reasonable to anticipate, as everyone has said, that the trail of people, or the flow of people is going to start and increase over the next number of weeks. I might suggest that the doctor, the chief, emergency management director, and I, and maybe Captain Rescue, but at least those four, and if not the fourth, at least the three, we could sit down and try to put together an approach or a plan, or a somewhat similar to what we've done with a couple of other groups, based on the state guidelines, a request for a plan. It's kind of a collaborative effort between government and those that will actually be operating. We could do that over the next, end of this week and into the beginning of next week, so we'd have an approach similar to what the chief was describing. And then we might be in a position to take some kind of official action on the part of the council that would work into that.
All right, well, that sounds good. I mean, like I said, we can, at the very least, we can make a recommendation, and make a recommendation that you do that, pursue that, and also a recommendation that then anyone coming to the island be tested before they get here. If we can't make it a prerequisite, then at least make it a recommended procedure.
We
But-
can make it a prerequisite if we want. We can go above the state order. We can do that. The question is, do we want to do that? That was my question. Is this the policy the town council wants to adopt? And then we become innovative and figure it out? Or do we listen to, it can't be done, it's impossible, we can't do that? That was my question. I thought we were going to discuss this, have the plan today. The doctor talked about it yesterday. However, I'm willing to wait, but the more we wait, the more people that show up and the more it becomes a moot point. And this is exactly what we've been discussing for the past month. So we don't have answers yet again, and we're going to have to wait again. In the meantime, more people come here. That's all I'm going to say on the subject. If anybody wants to refute that, feel free to do it. But I'm incredulous at this point, but let's move on.
Chris, Willie, is your hand up?
Yeah, it is. The vast majority of the employers, and this information was via the questionnaire 3 weeks ago. The vast majority of the employers that have the ability to quarantine will be quarantining. And most of them said that they would be monitoring the health and feeding, the people that are going to be here are going to be taken care of on site. But if there is ability to test them, I think they would all take advantage of that, because that just eases their liabilities as well. And the quicker that can be done, obviously we have, the influx has been continuing for the past week. There's more on Tuesday, and these numbers aren't small; they're fairly large. So at the very least, if it can't happen before they get here, the ability to do it once they're here, which is what as I understood it, was talked about last week, would be nice to employ that method at the very least. It doesn't mean that they don't have to quarantine. It just, I think, again, it's just another mechanism that we can use, or another tool that can be used right away. For the employers that do not have the ability to quarantine, they have stated that they don't intend on bringing employees here until that out-of-state quarantine is lifted. So that's a different scenario and a different story. But if this ability to test people before they got here was available, then they would probably consider bringing their employees in earlier. Or as soon as the out-of-state quarantine was lifted. So, I mean, I do agree with Andre. We've had plenty of time to get this plan up. And I was under the impression that we would be discussing I thought, Dr. Workup, you can maybe clarify the tests that you were talking about that were stockpiling on Friday. That was a 4-day turnaround, if I remember.
Correct. Those were the original conventional swabs. And then we've been able to secure the rapid testing machine over the last 48 hours, which will significantly enhance what we can do.
Okay.
The reason I think that's important for the council to consider is, I know that there's often a gravitational pull towards people that are symptomatic, but I'm equally disturbed by the amount of people that will be asymptomatic interacting with community members and people. So I know that the wellness checks, we're doing wellness checks here on employees. We're all, I've just COVID tested negative, but I didn't want us to be equally understandable that those individuals that are being wellness tested that are not symptomatic will not register. And so therefore testing would be essential for those individuals that are here quarantining, but due to their essential duties, maybe interacting with other individuals or town members or other employees. So to have a symptomatic process only is not completely covering all of what we need to do.
Chris, go ahead.
Do we know the scope of what we're talking about? I mean, understanding we have a lot of employers. How many people are we talking about? And do we know when they are coming in? Sven, I know you have various business groups put together. Do we have a schedule of any sort that we can actually implement? So if we have people coming Tuesday, is there anything that can be implemented to, I mean, I agree with Dr. Workup with the asymptomatic people. That's kind of the underlying, one of the underlying issues with this virus is that there's a lot of people are asymptomatic, and that's the biggest hurdle, I think, particularly in our scenario. So do we have a schedule, or do we know the scope of what we're actually talking about when it comes to number of tests? Do we even have a ballpark figure?
Sven, go ahead.
So a couple of things, Chris, we can ask the big hotels and the big businesses for rough numbers. As of a week ago, I heard some numbers. Everybody's sort of trying to figure out how many people to have come and actually changing employment status because of expected numbers of people. But we can get that very quickly if everybody thinks that's valuable, if needed. We don't have it. I do think it's clearly based on the conversations with the hotel owners the other day that Julie Fuller ran. It's clearly more than 100. And so we're into hundreds. And I guess my suggestion for the council is that we should have, either we can request it or Jim has already offered it, have Jim, Ema, the doctor, and the chief put a plan together. And if we can see that Friday or Monday, whatever is reasonable, then we have something to act on.
Okay, well, as far as action's concerned, the sooner the better, but I would certainly endorse, to Andre's point, if there's the ability for any of this testing to be done now on island and we have the availability of it. I don't care if it's the quick test or the Dr. Workup, forgive me, what was the test you were talking about Friday, the one that takes a 4-day turnaround? What was that termed as? Conventional test?
Right, it's the nasopharyngeal swab, the
Yeah.
conventional test that they do. And
So,
I have spoken with Mr. McComb, and we have kind of a schematic drawn out that if we have people that are, say, we're going to manage 10 of them a day, we can do it with one flow. If it's going to be more than 11 per day, we would institute a different workflow here at the office, utilizing kind of the parking lot as a respiratory diagnostic center. So the health center has some schematics that we have worked out with Bill McComb. So the only thing I would really need is to get that estimation, so that way I can report that to the DOH, so we can secure the testing that we need. We've been in communication with them this week saying we're in a slightly different situation than the mainland in the sense that we get influxes and boluses, and the DOH is not in the position to help us physically on site, but they're ready to help us with testing supplies.
what was the influx that Chief Carlone was talking about? Chief, you mentioned you just mentioned it. There are people coming on Tuesday?
The Spring House.
I believe so, sir. I believe there's, from what I'm hearing, I'm not exactly sure where, but I think the leases start around then.
Okay.
We have indication, I think, from David House, they're coming to the Spring House.
People have, nowhere else to go but to the rooms where they've been contracted to come from other states. That's my understanding of it.
Right, and my understanding
Okay.
is that employer already has protocols in place, but the new but the new thing in this whole discussion is the ability to test. So, I think any of the employers that have these employees scheduled to come out and can schedule anything that we have available, I would like to see that encouraged at the very least, until we have an actionable plan that we can vote on. And I think the scope of that is going to be very important for Dr. Workup to to know, and that's only going to come from the restaurant and the hotel groups and the marina groups and anybody that's bringing in their employees over the next month and a half. So that they can be, so, I mean, it's going to have to be scheduled. If there's the capacity is 10 a day, 20 a day, he needs to know that. So that information needs to be made available.
Martha, do you have,
Ken?
yes, Martha?
Yeah, I've got a question on all of this. All we're talking about are summer workers coming in. What about people who are already here, who haven't been tested, who work in any of these various hospitality industries? I feel like we're just jumping over everybody here as if we all know we're all fine, and I don't think we know that. We're just giving priority to everybody who comes in and ignoring everybody who's here?
Well, Dr. Workup, do you have any insight into that? I mean, is that something we should be concerned about, and testing those workers who are here are not symptomatic?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think it all comes down to how long have they been here. If they've been on island where we know there's a very low prevalence and there continue to be asymptomatic, they're likely not a threat to the community. I think if they're going to be interacting with newcomers to the island or new employees that are coming on a seasonal basis, then that's the nature of why we need to counsel people, in the sense that you might have been negative last week, but if you're going to interact with a whole new group of individuals coming into town, then that's a different scenario.
And we don't have an unlimited supply of tests at this time, right?
That's correct.
Right. That's kind of where I'm going with this. Are there people here who need to be tested, want to be tested, who haven't been able to or haven't felt it was available unless they were symptomatic?
Ken?
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
So I think we've had a couple of developments just within the last 3 or 4 days that have changed what our capabilities are. Probably still below what the expected number of arrivals would be. Until just recently, we were still back on the conventional testing and really kind of a different approach prior to this development. And I think having council action is worthwhile, but it has also developed, as we've all experienced through this, that things have changed subsequent to a vote. So I think the approach should be that the council recognize the medical center and the medical director working under the guidance of the Rhode Island Department of Health to identify priorities with respect to testing based on the capacity we have, both physical, as has been described in terms of driving in, making appointments, et cetera, but also how many tests and how many cartridges are available, and have the doctor in consultation with the rest of us identify what the best use of those, to use it, 100 tests would be over the next week, given that the council has communicated clearly the desire to test prospectively and kind of prophylactically, as opposed to responding to an outbreak, which we clearly don't have yet. Thanks.
All right, council. It sounds like we want to have the town manager work with the EMA directors and with the medical center, with consultation with DOH, to come up with a prospectus on how and if we need to proceed at the council level to facilitate the whatever testing might be possible and necessary of incoming workers to the island as expediently as possible. Is that correct?
Yes.
Any comments? Sven, go.
I don't want to exclude these groups
I'm sorry.
from having their input on it. In the meantime, Sven,
Chris?
that's as important as everything else. We got to know the scope of this and
Got it.
what we're actually talking about.
Sven, now go ahead.
Yep. Thank you, Ken. I will get to, I've already started reaching out. I will get to Dr. Workup and to Jim, the best estimate of rough numbers, just so he can understand scope and scale. I think it's important just from an information point of view. So I will get that ASAP.
All right. And I think I'm anticipating that we'll have a meeting next week. I'm thinking Wednesday. Does anyone have any comments on that?
Based on this, I would say Monday.
Martha, go ahead.
It's Molly. I have a couple of comments that came in over the internet, if you don't mind.
Okay, go ahead.
One was about the other people that may need to be tested, people who come and go. I just got a comment from the bagel shop asking about, gosh, I'm sorry. Here we go. How about all the tourists coming, testing only employees and not vacationers? And that's a theme that we've heard before.
Yeah, Dr. Workup, do you have any comment on that, the practicality of that?
Yeah, I think that's the key phrase is will be virtually impossible for us to do that. That's more of a state DOH issue and looking at prevalence rates. But right now, about 8% of all patients that are tested are positive, not necessarily symptomatic, but positive for COVID. I think you can expect probably the same numbers. 8% of your tourists are going to have potential asymptomatic COVID.
Right. Molly, did you have any other emails you want to share with us at the moment?
Not at the moment on that topic. Thank you.
Okay.
Wait,
Andre, go ahead.
Dr. Workup, you there?
Yes, sir.
All right, so can you walk us through a scenario? Because I've been listening to the state, I listened to the opening guidelines for the restaurants, at the webinar last night and whatnot. And it's going to be quite difficult for restaurants to open outside dining and whatnot. But as far as I understood, okay, so if we have an outbreak, and I'm just looking for clarification, I'm not saying I know this is the answer. So could you walk through the steps of what would happen? Say if somebody tested positive, they go to the mainland, they test positive, and they said I was on Block Island, and they get the contact info of where all of these people went. What happens on the state level? What happens after that when they start tracking these people down? Like say, I don't know, I'll just say, somebody said, oh, I went to the Southeast Light. Is the staff of that organization or restaurant or hotel going to be put into quarantine automatically, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think in the scenario you proposed, that then the DOH would reach out to us to coordinate how best to test the contacts from the contact tracing. So the contacts wouldn't necessarily just be put in quarantine, they would be tested. So if we were able, to the best of our ability, if they knew that there were 20 people they solidly do, they wouldn't put them in quarantine specifically, they would test them.
But that's the definition of contact, correct? There's a definition of contact.
Correct. It's got to be close contact within 3 feet or a prolonged period of time.
All right, because I wanted to make it clear that, because it could be a question that arises where the way it's been now that people have been asked to quarantine for 2 weeks if they've had contact with anybody that's symptomatic or has the COVID. And, that would lead into obviously a lot of issues where, a B team would be needed for these establishments in case, this whole staff came in contact with such a person, and it just doesn't exist on Block Island. So I'm just, thinking the business, say if there was an outbreak, then the business, hotel, restaurant, tourist attraction would not automatically be closed. Is that correct?
I think I would expect that the DOH may close them if they have a solid evidence that it may have come from a direct employee or if it came from a
Right.
patron that had significant contact. The DOH has the ability through the state to do such a thing. I think they would be sensitive to that, but I think you would see us coordinate with the DOH and either a group of epidemiological people to descend on the island to try to do contact tracing.
Okay, thank you.
So obviously it furthers that. That's why everyone keeps emphasizing the idea of the masks and hand washing and and social distancing and following the rules. So, Tom, if you could clarify that at some point. I believe it was within 6 feet and for 3 minutes, was it not? It's not a quick brush by type situation in terms of the definition of contact.
That's correct. Yep, it's not a kind of casual walk by. It either you've been in the contact with this individual in close proximity or for a prolonged period of time. So
Yeah.
certainly servers, people that are cashiers, certainly that don't have any respiratory protection between they and the customer, I would likely think that they expand the definition that there's a potential contact there.
Right. Okay.
Ken?
Yeah, Jim, go ahead. Jim Kern.
Quickly, the availability of testing has changed that to Andre's question. Until not that long ago, on a case-by-case basis, Rhode Island Department of Health has been evaluating contact patterns and invoking quarantines, isolations if people have been positive. Listening to the calls involving other communities, it can get pretty complicated in terms of contacts, who's required to quarantine, et cetera. But given, as the doctor said, given that there's testing that is on a different scale now, it does change some of the tactics available to the Rhode Island Department of Health team. And I know it's frustrating to people because they ask, well, what's going to happen if one person is positive in a staff of 4 people? They're going to evaluate it as it goes, or evaluate it as they can recreate what happened, and there are going to be different answers given different sets of circumstances. And just listening to some of the different scenarios that have occurred in other communities over the last month, there really are kind of an unlimited number of combinations.
Right. This, it sounds like it might be helpful for us to reach out to the state and get in the same room with several of the state agencies to get a clear picture of what it is, where their heads are at in terms of dealing with this. Andre, would you agree?
That is in the works.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can say it that, sitting in on the municipal leaders meetings, there are unique situations that affect Block Island, and the person who organizes those meetings has agreed to that and has asked if we would like a meeting with the health, the EMA, the governor's office, to address just these issues that affect the island uniquely, that the governor's concerned about with, the close quarters, that kind of stuff. So, yes, they're willing to arrange a meeting with us to just go over those certain questions that people have and try to get us answers to those. And that should happen shortly.
Right. Okay. Anyone else have any comments or questions on this particular item? Anyone want to take, and I'm waiting for Chris to check back in.
I'm here.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I just saw you check. All right. Any other medical issues or items for you want to bring up while we have Dr. Workup on?
Can I just by Monday, can we have a plan that we can present to the public of, medical response to any of this? I know it's out there. It's come in pieces. I just would like to alleviate the concerns of the public of, what's going to be done during, if there's an outbreak, the whole testing thing, the whole protocol, Dr. Wolkoff's brought some great information to us the last meeting and at this meeting. So Dr. Wolkoff, I'm just wondering if you could put together a document that, we could share with the community just to alleviate some of that angst and concern about, some of these scenarios, and nothing really different than what you've provided to us already, just kind of like, put it all together, like, and if that'd be great if you could do that.
Or update it.
Yeah. And we know this changes on a daily basis. It's just, I think we just need a clear path forward and some documentation for the public to alleviate some of this issues that they want answers to.
So getting back to the question, I guess, before Molly brought in some comments or whatever, the question was, I guess you want to have a meeting on Monday then, and a specific question on who do you want the specific answer from and who do you want to work on it?
Ken?
Go ahead, Sven.
I heard that Jim, Bill, EMA, the chief and the doctor were going to get together. So it seemed that that's the group. If Dr. Warkup wants to be the lead of it or Jim wants to be the lead, doesn't matter, but that seems to be the group.
Okay. Andre, do you concur with that?
Yes.
Okay. And specifically,
Ken,
go ahead, Martha.
the only thing that I would say, as far as the protocol goes, I don't think we need or anybody needs specific details of a medical center protocol. I think we need more of a broad brush on that. The testing is what, at least I'm really a lot more concerned about. And I know it's a moving target. I know it changes every day. But the more availability of testing we can get for everybody, not just for people coming in. And I don't know, because people define contact in different ways. I mean, people go to the mainland and come back and say, oh, well, I haven't been to the mainland. I haven't been anywhere because I live on Block Island. How much that I find frustrating. I find that. So that's, I think the emphasis on more specifics would be on the testing protocols and the actual how you're dealing with it. It's good to know that it's a plan in place, but I'm not putting out something out there to have everybody going, oh, this isn't right, this is wrong. We're not second guessing the medical center. I'm not second guessing the medical center. Information, yes, but that's it, not for debate.
Okay. Chris Willie?
And I want to remind everybody, testing or not, and the fact that these employees are going to be quarantined. I mean, as I understand it, quarantining is at the moment the best mechanism. Yes, testing is nice, but employers are required to quarantine, and they are going to quarantine. Then I want everybody to remember that. Like that's what these employers are doing right now. We've received several plans from all the employers, what they intend to do. This ability to test is going to be another layer to ease people's minds. But as far as easing people's minds, I think I want to extend the same quarantine message to the people that live here that are coming from out of state that aren't quarantining. And we've been focusing on employers and employees, but it seems that some of our own residents are as guilty or not paying attention or don't think it applies to them, and it does. And if everybody does the right thing and is, again, socially responsible, then this is going to go a lot smoother than I think some people anticipate. So, let's not forget about the people that live here that aren't quarantining when they're coming back from Connecticut or New York or Florida or wherever. Because that's as important as these employees showing up and quarantining. Okay.
Right. Martha, go ahead.
No, I was only saying that's just what I was the point that I was trying to make. I'm glad it's been reemphasized.
Okay.
I know, Martha.
The other thing I'll point out is, and I've asked for clarification at the state level on what that quarantining means, because there's been a little bit of confusion, but I will get back to everyone when I get an answer to my question. So, All right. Any
I-
further, Andre, go ahead.
I thought it was a great question, Ken, if you want to let everybody know what it was, because I think it's important.
Well, in reading the latest state releases in terms of quarantining, there's some ambiguity in terms of what that means for those coming from out of state. There might be an indication that anyone coming in from out of state to quarantine is allowed to go out and get food. And that seems to be counterproductive to the quarantine situation. So I did ask for some clarification at the state level, and they've yet to get back to me on that. So that's all. That's where I was at.
Yeah, I thought it was a great question, and just they haven't answered you yet. So,
So, and we will certainly, as soon as we get an answer to that, we'll pass it along prior to any meeting. We'll do it right away as soon as we get it. All right. Anything else on this?
Well, Ken,
I guess the only, go ahead, Sven.
I guess not quite on this testing issue, but because it's come up a couple of times. One, on the business reach out, all the businesses have met or at least talked to all the other businesses in their group. So for example, Julie Fuller is doing hotels. They had 47 people on the call the other day, and everybody found it very helpful. Retail, I want to give 2 points of feedback that we can decide whether we as a community want to discuss asking the state about relief or comments. And I think the state has asked for comments. One is on retail. As you may know, the state restrictions is on 300 square feet for a store per person. So that means for the employee and another a shopper, you need 300, 600 square feet. That puts many of our stores off basis, and therefore it's got to be curbside or by appointment only. And one request from the retail group was, would the town council ask the state if that could actually be 200 square feet? The second area, Kristen Kiley has been talking to all the bars and restaurants, or all of them. And I think Jim is working on this, but many are interested in expanding outside service area onto their own private land. And that is another conversation. Kristen is trying to get a number of how many people and who is really interested in how big. But I want to let you know that 2 of the big pieces of feedback from the businesses has been expanding outside service area and retail square footage. Other than that, Shea Butcher is leading marinas and is already buying a lot of hand sanitizers and working with Sands and others. So it seems to be, there's a lot of dialogue and a lot of good discussion among them.
Thank you, Sven.
Ken, I can speak to how far we've gotten with restaurants, or we can save it for a future meeting.
can I just before we go on to that, can I just?
Okay, go ahead.
So, Jim, can you just for the public, we've gotten some questions about the quarantine. It's just come up, and I mean, I know that everybody coming from out of state into Rhode Island and therefore Block Island needs to quarantine for 2 weeks. So I just want to make sure that that's the message that is going out there, that if you come to Block Island from Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, anywhere from out of state, you still have to quarantine for 2 weeks. Because I know a lot of people have said, oh, well, you know, the state dropped the quarantine. Well, the state didn't drop the quarantine for out of state. So have you been having any issues with that, with people asking that question? And like I said, I'm just bringing it up because I think we should clarify it in a public forum and let everybody know. And if I'm wrong with my assumptions, you know, just let me know.
So he is not wrong. He is correct.
Okay.
The stay-at-home order was removed by Governor Raimondo, but that's a different thing. It was much ballyhooed. What applies now and has applied is, as Andre said, a quarantine required for anybody coming into any part of the state of Rhode Island from another state. There are qualifications, and we've discussed them relative to people coming for work. Particularly, that was particularly an issue with neighboring towns, et cetera. I won't spend any time on that, but I have had emails come in, not often, not necessarily always to me, but through the clerk's office, through Charlene, through other people that forward them, asking, had one coming in from Massachusetts. I own the property. I'm looking to well, was asking if it was okay to go get food, go get some exercise, and the way I read it is I'm not able to do that. I'm not able to go to the coffee shop because there's the way I read the quarantine as it exists now, and I responded that the person's interpretation was correct, and they generally add in, that they would be careful with the precautions, and the answer is you do need to quarantine at the point where you've come in to Block Island. As we've covered in previous meetings, that doesn't mean you have to stay 14 days before you leave or anything like that. If you're going to be here 5 days, quarantine the entire 5 days. And the quarantine definition, although there's been some discussion about, the specifics of where you can get food, until told otherwise, our definition of quarantine is you stay in the property, you send somebody else for food, your movements are restricted to medical and similarly essential visits. That's not coffee shops, liquor stores, et cetera. That's essentially emergencies or medical care. That's what's imposed, and that's what, until the governor makes changes in phase 2, when that happens, and if it happens, and the information we've gotten is doesn't seem to be indicating either way. The quarantine is still in place, and that's for anybody out of state. If you've come from out of state and spent 2 weeks in Rhode Island, you've satisfied the quarantine, and then it applies differently at the point where you come to Block Island. And just quickly to put it back to the earlier conversation, if there are arrangements that, and that's part of the thing that's also changed because circumstances have changed from probably 6 weeks ago, if a large employer has a place to put people in Rhode Island for some period of time, that's an approach that would obviate the need for the quarantine, but then it also, it seems to me, fits into an approach that we would develop, that the town would develop with the leadership of the medical center, because just because you've tested or just because you've quarantined doesn't mean from some other contact you might not have become infected. So it continues to be something we're going to have to adjust as we go, but the important thing is you are required to quarantine if you come from any other state. That's a state mandate, and it applies coming here by any mode of transportation, airport, ferry, and as a result, I will tell you and the rest of the group that the ferries that come from out of state are in communications with me, unofficial so far, but in communications have said they wouldn't be operating as long as that quarantine is in place.
On the state level, not ours, because we don't have one.
Right, on the state level, the 14 out of state. So if you're coming from out of state, you have to quarantine. So a ferry from out of state would essentially not be a practical concept until that state quarantine is lifted.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments on this item? At this point, it might also be a good time to bring up, since we have Tom Workup still with us, might bring up the question we had from the rescue squad. We did get a letter from the rescue squad. Anyone have any comments about that?
You want to read it?
Yeah. We have a letter from the rescue squad dated, well, no date on it. Yeah, it is on May 11th. from the rescue squad saying they're writing a letter. The rescue captain is writing on behalf of herself and the rescue squad. We strongly request the town council to consider the implications of reinstating the licenses to the moped businesses during this very serious health threat and global pandemic. Our greatest concern is the safety of Block Island Rescue Squad when responding to any call. Every incident puts all responders at potential risk of exposure. We can reduce the number of calls, then by all means we should do so, including limiting potentially dangerous, unnecessary activities. We all know that mopeds can be dangerous means of transportation and often have life-changing consequences to those that get hurt while operating them. Please do not let those consequences extend to the members of the squad. We all continue to hear and say this summer is going to be different. Everyone must change the way they do things. Businesses must change the way they operate, or even if they can't operate at all. The same will hold true for the rescue squad. Currently, only a handful of our members, including myself, are overwhelmed. Currently, only a handful of members, including myself, are willing to respond to calls, leaving us grossly understaffed. My fear is that we will quickly become overwhelmed and potentially unable to respond should one or any of us become ill. We are also, like most other healthcare services, in short supply of necessary PPE required for all calls. The battle to obtain masks, gowns, gloves, and the proper cleaning supplies is real and expensive. Responding to a call is now much more difficult and time-consuming due to the protocols put in place in response to the pandemic. The required cleaning and sanitizing of all equipment in the ambulances after each call is now a much more time-consuming task, further draining our shortened resources. Please consider this request. We count on our community leaders to make the appropriate decisions to keep all of us safe. Please help our mostly year-round dedicated volunteer rescue staff rescue staff stay healthy and safe. Any reduction in calls will be a great relief. Last year, we responded to 54 moped accidents. Please contact me with any questions. Respectfully, Tracy Fredericks, Captain, Block Island Rescue Squad. First, I'd like to just comment. Bill McComb, are you on there?
Yes, Scott, I am.
Just first things first, I just wanted to address her problems with short supply of necessary PPE. You've been doing all that you can to get any supplies necessary from FEMA, have you not?
Yes, I have, and I think the chief also was able to obtain some through our EMA also. And Kara was working on that too, so I can check with Tracy as far as if there's an issue with shortage.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, if you could do that, if you could find out what it is they actually need. And I know that there's been indication of Rhode Island EMA getting other supplies and whatnot. So I think maybe if there is a shortage, if you could maybe let them know that we have a problem, maybe they could try and channel a little bit more towards in our direction. So thank you, Bill.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll follow up with her first thing in the morning.
Okay, Andre, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I did follow up with Tracy on that phone call, Captain of the Rescue Squad, Tracy Fredericks. And I basically asked her with these, about the staff at the volunteers. And she says she's roughly down to 1/3 of the volunteers she normally has because, some of them are over in the risk group. Some of them are like, yeah, I don't want to be, coming in contact with that. They're a little worried about it. And then there's the other issue of an ambulance takes 45 minutes to sanitize. So after a run is done, it's 45 minutes before they can consider putting another person in there. And then, if there's a minor emergency where they got to take an ambulance off the bus, off on the boat, two members have to go. The ambulance is on the boat. Then there's the flying. There's two members that, one or two members that go. I don't know that number on the plane if it's more of an emergency. And I'm not an expert on this, but these are the facts that I got from her. So I think we need to have a discussion with our rescue squad about summer coverage for really anything. I respect them for being forthright with that information, but we may be in a situation where we're short. And I think, that's the data I'm getting from her is looking that way. So I don't have any answers, but I think a meeting with them would be very prudent at this point.
Okay, Sven Reesum, thank you.
Following on that, I'm right with Andre. I think on Monday's meeting, Ken, or whenever the next one is, I'd love to have an agenda item of, let's just call it all first responders and just doing a little bit of a polling, because and I understand why the rescue squad would be short given age and susceptibility, et cetera. So if that's an issue, I think we have an issue, and what can we do to alleviate that? So, you know, are there ways that we can either get cleaning help to clean the cabs, or do we actually have to go out and contract for some rescue? Same thing for fire, and same thing for police, obviously. But I think that's a good item to have both the chief and the heads of those groups help us with numbers. I think it's a really important point.
Any other comments? Comments or questions? Getting back to the main tenant, I certainly think we definitely have to have a conversation with the squad and with those involved in EMA. Getting back to her original, the crux of her letter, I'm not sure that the council has the wherewithal to do what they're asking specifically, and that is to not issue or not open up the licenses for that particular operation, the moped operation. We have gone through this before, and we have not successfully. We have limitations in place, and we have recommendations in terms of operations in place. It would certainly, I think we could certainly have conversations or make recommendations to the management of those operations to do what they could to further the safety of the activities above and beyond. But I'm not sure that we can do any more than that at this point. I definitely will. I'm open to having the item in a discussion with the squad and anyone else you want to, but I don't want to get their hopes up in terms of what they're requesting.
Ken?
Jim Kern, go ahead.
I've had conversations, as the council knows, subsequent to the last meeting. I was asked to reach out to them and ask for plans to be developed and submitted, primarily dealing with cleanliness. I'll describe that quickly and then get back to the question of emergency response. All of the operators responded based on the template that I sent, which is the Rhode Island state template for reopening businesses. There's 6 categories. There's about 8 subcategories in each category. And in those submittals, they identified approaches to cleanliness and approaches that they would put in place previous to renting. That's mopeds and bikes, which technically the licenses are suspended under the emergency ordinance. So I can get back to that. Subsequent to that, the letter came in from the rescue squad, and I did have a conversation with one of the major operators today, and essentially said that the larger issue of the vulnerability and possibly jeopardizing those that do that work and respond to those calls on behalf of all of us on the island, that to me, that's going to be another ongoing conversation and management issue if it is going to be one going through the summer, because for all of the things that create responses from them, I think it very well may be a case, although as Ken says, we're statutorily prevented from constraining the operation of the moped renters. But I also think business operators out here are going to be responsive to any conversation from the council and town management in which we voice a concern about the capacity to respond. So one's frankly a really big issue in terms of managing our capacity to respond, as was described through that letter, or their capacity to respond. But the constraints, we are statutorily prevented from constraining by council action the operation of the moped renters. So back to the cleanliness question and the planning, similar to what we're going to see with restaurants, in accordance with what the governor put out. I was able to get some clarification. I thought the submittals were pretty good. A couple of them put in steam cleaning and pressure washing. A number of us interpreted that to mean between each rental or many times a day. I got some clarification on that. That would be once a day, and in the interim, in between each rental, the equipment would be wiped down, all the places that somebody would actually put their hands on a bike or a moped, and the other precautions that are represented in those submittals that have been shared with the town council. We're not technically, by state statute, required to sign off on them. They're required to submit them. They are also required to post them. And at the point where the council is satisfied that those plans are sufficient, I think we're ready to move forward. I'd like a little bit more clarification on a couple things, but I think by and large they're in the place where we need them to be, and so I think we're pretty close to being in a position to recommend to the council that they, if it's their desire, lift them from the emergency ordinance and allow operation. As I said, the conversation about emergency response is one I think we're going to need to look at in light of all of the things that will happen out here through the summer. But I wanted to update the council on conversations I had with operators, and I had email conversations with a couple, and then a direct conversation with another.
Thank you, Jim.
Ken, could I mention something?
Yeah, Chief Carlone?
Yeah, I think that to support the rescue in the event that there is difficulty like that, we should consider reaching out to some of the private firms which have actually operated on the island, such as MedTech out of Pawtucket, and have the conversation in the event that something goes wrong and we will need some support.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Chief. Because I mean, the squad brings up the concerns about the 54 moped accidents, but that's out of 400 rescue calls. So there are other reasons out there that the squad has called out. This may carry over into other life occurrences and other activities that people do out here. That may.
But we have to remember that, one thing I always remember is that these are volunteers and they're very important. My staff is very important, but we're paid employees, so we would take a risk over and above the volunteers always, who are doing it out of the goodness of their heart. So if they have some concerns like that, I think we should have the discussions and try to put some funding in place, which may be out there in an emergency such as this.
Thank you, Chief.
Ken?
Martha, go ahead.
The other thing that slips through here, very often the fire department is involved in, and I only can speak to the rescue squad responding to mopeds because it just happens where I am in the summertime. And I often see the fire truck come for one of those accidents. And I know, of course, they go for every Life Star. So the fire department's involved in this as well, certainly.
Yeah.
I think it's
Go ahead, Sven.
I think this is all first responders. I agree, Martha.
My point that I was trying to get to was that, like I said, this is a certain percentage of the calls during the summer. There are other calls out here, and you can look at the statistics which we've been given in the past, and it may mean that if someone is thinking of coming to the island this summer and has some sort of a serious health condition that might be easily compromised, they probably would do well to consider whether or not they really that might be prudent this summer. So that's all I was trying to get at. Further comments on the letter, though? I guess the result of the letter is you want to have a conversation with the squad and with everyone and have a further conversation on this on Monday.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Could we get the squad on board with us on Monday? Somebody from the squad?
We can only find out. We can try. If anyone has a specific wording of a agenda item, please send it to me before Friday. Anything else on that before we move on? And any further comments moving on? There is one update Bill McComb, are you still on?
Yes, I am.
Bill, I want to thank you for, want to thank Interstate for all the work that they've been doing and trying to be a good partner in what's going on here. Do you have any other announcements or updates about the schedule you want to bring to us?
Yes, we announced last week, we added a couple of trips so people from the island could get off and come back. That was a good response to that. To that end, we're going to the next 2 Thursdays. So next week and the following week, we're going to make the Thursdays a 3-boat day. So that will give a longer time on the mainland. We'll give for islanders to go off and either shop or doctor's appointment and so forth. So we've adjusted, that's on our schedule right now, it's posted, but we have not gone to social media with it. We wanted to wait to this phone call, so hopefully a lot of local residents on the island will tomorrow morning can call up and take advantage of that. And then sometime later in the afternoon it will be up. But anyone looking to go off in the next 2 weeks on a Thursday that will become available.
That's great, Bill. Thank you very much for that. So that gives us Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, basically.
Correct. And there's going to be some adjustments to the schedules go forward, but we wanted to make this one right away so we can address the needs for the people living on the island.
Great. Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Andre.
Yeah, can I just follow up on that? And I just, really much appreciation goes to the amount of work on my part anyway, that goes into this. And I think it'd be important to, that people understand that, I think the ferry was responding to what the town was asking for, which was a reduced amount of trips. And they responded. They gave us a reduced amount of trips. It may have, it may have been seen as one-sided for people coming here, but I don't think anybody could have anticipated, even including the ferry company, that we were going to drop our quarantine when we did. And I know that you guys do your schedule 2 weeks out, and you were you responded almost immediately to that request. After we did drop our quarantine, there was some consternation about, the ferry schedule, and yet those concerns were brought to Interstate by us and some members of the public. And the ferry company responded to that almost instantly. And I think, I've certainly just learned that, I appreciate that, but I think it needs to be said out there so people have the understand about how a schedule is made. It's not made in a vacuum. It can't be. There is how many people who run a ferry that need to be considered when a ferry is added or deleted. So what I did learn in the meantime is that, apparently maybe Bill, you can correct me, but you've got a crew running a boat, and if one of those crew members gets sick, you have to remove all of those crew members from that boat. So that means you're scrambling to look for another crew for one boat, which may be already headed, doing something for another boat. So I guess, I didn't completely understand the operations of Interstate and all that in the meantime, but I think you guys have performed very well on your feet. I appreciate it. And I really appreciate the company responding to the community's needs.
Well, we appreciate that, Andre. I also, a lot of the credit needs to go to the crew. These guys are working long hours. They work on the boat. They're working hard to keep the boat clean. This is new for all of us, and it's challenging. And I think that our partnership together is working out well, and hopefully we'll all get through this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for the update.
Thanks, Bill.
Any other items anyone wants to bring up on the general item on the agenda? Health, safety, welfare management. Sven Reesum?
Yeah, and I'm not, maybe you can confirm for me. So on the agenda is on number, in the middle there is about resuming all the meetings. And I believe we did, but I just wanted to confirm that, and that there's a process that's going to start kicking off, because I think that is within this whole COVID discussion, because they were suspended because of the emergency order. Can you help me and just confirm and when our meeting's starting to be held again?
I'll have to look back at my notes. If anyone can fill it in, I'd be glad to listen.
Well, if not, I'd love to have all the meetings start. We did get a letter about the Charter Review Committee, but I know also, having talked to Jen and, planning and zoning, and there's a lot going on in zoning right now. So I think we should have all the committees start to resume in a timely, appropriate, technology-based fashion. I understand that there's some hardware that needs to get delivered or some little things. And I think, Jim, maybe you can update us, but I think we should start resuming normal Zoom-based meetings or whatever-based meetings required.
Are we talking about whether the council took the vote to release the constraint? I believe you did. And then the second thing is, we are going forward based on that discussion, and I believe there was a vote at least 2 meetings ago. We are going forward without any constraints other than the technical and security, making sure people are because if you're on our network, you would also create exposure within that network. So I didn't get into that when I gave my explanation last time. And I don't have specific updates on purchase of hardware, but we're proceeding as I described. First, with the clerk's office being able to basically fan out our capability to host meetings such that they run well, and they also we can take care of hardware issues if they come up, and also make sure that we're paying attention to security, because I think most people know that Zoom, I'm not picking on a particular company, but there have been security issues, and we want, that's not a problem until it's a problem, and then sometimes it's a really big problem. So we're proceeding. First, clerk's office, and they're involved in this meeting, and then I responded to the gentleman from the Charter Commission, and I've also made contact with Michelle relative to that specific request. I've also talked with Jen. So that's another thing we're moving forward with, and there are no constraints other than those that we are working on solving.
Thank you.
That good? Anybody else? All right, Ken had to step away. Do we need, I know we had to, Kathy Marola, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Do we need a motion about retail businesses, the licenses for the mopeds to change the ordinance?
You don't,
We don't?
you don't have,
We-
you don't have to do that today. You can do it at the next meeting. It's my understanding is we need to get some information first. I think they had referenced meeting with the rescue squad, et cetera.
Okay. All right. And I just want to add that I did also speak to some operators and, or one of them, and I brought up the rescue issue, and, they were basically like, you know, if it's an issue, we'd be happy to come to the table to discuss what the issues are. So that's all I wanted to add to that. And I'm hoping that we can continue this dialogue with them, you know, as issues come up. And I have gotten no indication from any of those operators that it would be anything different. And I know that's some people could be laughing about that right now, but I am operating under the assumption that right now we are in a serious situation. We all are. And I have no reason not to believe that they want to come to the table and discuss things with us, you know, instead of us forcing things on them. So I look forward to that. And I hope it all comes to fruition. Ken, I see you're back. I don't see anything else. I mean, does anybody else have any discussion for part of today or?
But Ken, this is Peter.
Peter,
Yes, Andre.
go ahead.
Could the fire department also be notified about this, and just not the captain of the rescue squad, because we do perform a role in this also?
I think what was being discussed was, you know, the EMA situation. As far as I knew that, yeah, you would have been included in that. But maybe I heard wrong. But of course you would be.
No, they said we were off the call for a minute, Andre, because it was all first responders.
It was first responders.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
all of them.
All right. So, Pete, you're in and out. Martha, you're in and out. I'm getting pieces of your conversation. Ken, do you hear this? Can you hear them?
I'm not sure that they're cutting out. They just weren't saying anything. But yes, the answer to your question, Pete, is we'll definitely keep all first responders and we'll involve them all.
That was my question. Thank you very much.
Yep, you're welcome. So I guess Monday's agenda then, when we hash it out the next couple of days and post it, we want to have it on 4:00 on Monday. Is that a consensus or what?
Well, will everybody be, will Tom Warkup, police chief, will everybody be ready by Monday at 4? That's the question. I'd hate to set a meeting where people won't be ready. I'd like to get some results at the next meeting. And, you know, firm things that we can start implementing in the community, because, you know, Memorial Day is literally days less than 2 weeks away. And was put into perspective to me, who is having trouble trying to figure out what day it is to begin with on a daily basis. And I think, you know, as long as everybody will be ready by Monday at 4, yeah, I think, but if we can poll people and find out if that'll be the case, yes. Well, like I said, I don't want to set a meeting where people, you know, won't be ready.
Could I say something, Ken?
As soon as I figure out who it is.
The chief, Carlone.
Yep, go ahead.
All right, as far as the testing, if what he's referring to is the testing on the mainland, we're not going to be getting any results on that besides what the health department said by Monday, which I already spoke to. Everybody should be taking care of their employees, taking their temperature, asking them about the symptomology, keeping them on the property, feeding them there, and keeping them quarantined for the 2 weeks. As far as the ambulance situation, I got a little information on that from MedTech. They probably could handle some of the testing here and may even be able to get federal money. So I can look further into that. But specifically, what is it, Andre, that you would like me to be prepared for Monday?
No, I'm asking everybody to just come prepared with what we discussed to have a discussion about, which is those 2 items that you just brought up.
Okay. I will talk to MedTech and see exactly what they can do and the potential for getting FEMA funding. And the other matter I think is very important is that every business is on the same sheet of music with respect to quarantining. As far as the quarantining from people from coming in from out of state, we've taken all the license plates down every day. We've been out on patrol, and they really have been respecting the quarantine thus far. People that own homes here coming in from out of state, they came in with all their provisions also. We've kept a very, very close eye on that.
Anybody got a comment? Anybody good?
Sven, I have a question.
Martha, go ahead.
Sven, were you going to say something about the restaurants, bars, expanded space, or did you already cover everything you meant to say?
Go ahead, Sven.
Yeah, no, it's just that a number. Well, first of all, Kristen is getting feedback. I know Jim and I have talked a little bit, trying to figure out what restaurants and or bars. The question is that not the question. A number are asking if they can expand their liquor service area outside of their current defined space. Some have talked about being on public property. Some have talked about being on private property. I think we as the council need to get an idea of how many people and who they are. My personal feeling is it's only on private property, but then I think the liquor board will need to convene.
So they're going to give us something definitive?
Yes, that is coming.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, can I respond to Martha on that? I did listen, again, I think I already said this, but I listened to the webinar last night, and restaurants are going to have a really hard time with the rules the state has put in place. I think I'm willing to be flexible as a council member. I think we're going to have to address those certain issues. I think it's going to be site specific. I think a plan would have to come from, an individual restaurant or a bar or whatever have you, and we'll have to evaluate them. Right now, I can't say giving up public property would be a good idea. However, somebody might put a proposal to us that includes an enhancement of that public property for whatever reason. I don't know. I'm not going to slam the door shut on any proposal right now that any business is going to
Okay, excuse me. That's exactly what I asked. I said we needed something definitive to respond to. That's what I just said.
Yeah. Okay. And I think the definitive.
We're saying the same thing. You're saying the same thing.
Okay. Well, maybe I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, you are.
It happened.
You don't want to admit it.
Ken?
Oh, I admit it.
Jim, go ahead.
Light clear. I've talked to Andre today and others, trying to, I don't know that I ever reached Mark, not his fault. Jen, the planning people statewide have pushed some things through planners. I've gotten some things, I've forwarded them to the council. To Martha's point, I'm trying to put together a rather simplified framework for making such an application with a sketch design, so that we could set up how we would respond to a particular request for expansion of alcohol service, for example. Andre got into some other things, public ways and the like. That has also been discussed in a number of communities. So we'll have something put together for Monday that will describe how we might go about directing people to make that application.
Okay, Jim, could I just say, I think sometimes we get too tied up in creating the template when the people who are working with it may come up with ideas that don't fit into it that may be very well be better ideas. And as long as they follow, as long as they make very clear what they're talking about and follow a broad guideline, I'd hate to be, trying to fit round pegs into square holes and so forth.
I agree. The one that I favor is one from the town of Narragansett. I believe I've forwarded it. If I haven't, I'll forward it to you. It's really pretty basic, and it's not intended to constrain. It's really just intended to, it's about, I don't know, 9 single lines on a page that just says, this is how we'd like you to do it. It's really just directions. Please do this, and we'll consider it. Other communities, South Kingstown being one, much more elaborate, much more, I would say, constraining. So I agree with you. That's one of the reasons why I favored theirs, and that's going to be the basis upon which I recommend the approach we take.
The bottom line, I think, that all these businesses have to remember is that the town can't be any less stringent than the state is. So if the state's putting out the guidelines for how to operate, first the operators have to meet those guidelines, and whether or not the town is more restrictive or not is another story, but we can't be any less restrictive than the state. So they have to make sure they're towing the line with the state guidelines that are out there on the websites before they come to us.
Quickly, for example, the state restriction is 20 tables. The town council in New Shoreham can't say, we're good, you can go to 25 tables. What I'm talking about is in locating those 20 tables, if your present, and I'm not suggesting people do this, but if your present configuration might be expanded so you can get 20 tables, or you can get the proper spacing even for the 9 tables that you have, and it's technically not contained within your present liquor service area, we're trying to put together a plan so that we're ready in case somebody wants to ask, so that they'll have the capacity to ask for that expansion. But a good point by Ken, it doesn't put us in a position to expand or make any easier any of the constraints that the state has put in place and are still putting in place, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything else, anyone? Andre.
Yeah, just to Martha, first of all, I agree with you. Yeah.
Good.
I just feel as though, personally, the business is going to need help. The restaurants are going to need help this year. I mean, my business would be considered a restaurant, but it's so much different than any other restaurant. And one restaurant in town is different than the one around the corner on Water Street. We're all different. We all have different ways of doing, our business. So I just gonna, just throw out there that as a counselor, I am not interested in micromanaging this. The guidelines are great. I think we're going to see some very creative proposals from the businesses on Block Island this summer, and I can't wait to see them actually. I also, Jim, you've been referencing these emails we've gotten from these different towns in the state and what they've been doing. And quite frankly, I feel a little overwhelmed by them all. I'm just wondering, Sven or Jim, does the restaurant group and the hotel group that, that you're working with, do the leaders of these groups have these to use as, are they getting them also? Okay. Good.
If I can speak, Ken.
Right.
Yes, they are, and they're. I guess, Andre, just to make sure we're on the same page, these groups, for the most part, aren't really sending in a report per se. To your point, I don't think everybody should be managing their own business. This is for them to manage. what those groups are a way for us to suddenly go out, as I just did, and ask them all about how many employees are coming and roughly when, and to help each other out in bulk buying or group support. At this moment, we have not asked them to send in a report or to tell us how things are going to be done, because I think, to your point, every business is going to be different, and each hotel or each restaurant or each bar, but they are trying to focus in on what are the big issues. So the retail group mentioned this issue about square footage, the bar and restaurant group about outdoor dining square footage. And then we need a process for them to formally have an application or a request. But unless you want, at this moment, we are not getting reports from each group, because I think everybody is going to be handling it differently. They're just making sure that they're all adhering to and understanding the state requirements for that the governor issues. So let me know.
All I was saying is,
Martha,
all I
go-
was trying to say, all I was trying to say was, and I think liquor's a little bit different because it comes under our liquor commission. And if they're adhering to state regs, and all they need to do is change the service area, which I think probably pretty much everybody already has most of their area covered, but nevertheless, there may be some changes. That's something that we can do without anything else. We just need to get from them what they want.
Yep.
As long as it adheres to existing state rules, there may be some things that we have the latitude to do on our own because we're the liquor board.
right.
We're not changing anything.
That's a good point, Martha. I think there's many of the liquor licenses we issue have the capacity already within their permit, within their license that they've already been approved for, to expand to the point where they can retain a good seating within their confines of their property. The only thing and your second point is also well taken, and I think we've all made it, is that they do need to adhere to the regulations, but also there's some safety concerns too. For instance, if you have a porch that has a canopy over it, that's outdoor seating. But as soon as you enclose it with vinyl curtains and try and close it in, and then it's no longer outdoor seating, and that would be problematic. So there's certain subtleties to it, but as we said, I think there's a lot of capacity on the island to be able to make up the differences until such time as they can do indoor seating to some degree. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, a motion to adjourn.
So soon? Second.
So moved.
Seconded by Andre. All those in favor, Andre,
Aye.
Ben,
I
Willie,
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
I vote in the affirmative. Motion adjourned, motion to carry. We
And
adjourn. Thank you all, and we will have a meeting on Monday at 4 o'clock.
Monday at 4. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.